夏休みを楽しみください。
This is a story from about 4 years ago, but I thought I'd write about it. It was during my last summer vacation in high school. I was enrolled in the welfare department, and every year I used my summer vacation for internships. I had an internship that day as well, and I was on my way home after finishing my night shift. I was almost home, waiting at a traffic light, when a fairly large car passed by me, and a girl peeked out from the top of it. I was dazed after the night shift and thought, oh, that's the type of car that opens at the top. Then, when the car had moved a certain distance away, something strange happened. The girl's head turned half a turn vertically, so that the top of her head was facing down. And she looked at me. She then grinned and disappeared. I was frozen, not understanding what had happened, when I heard someone say clearly in my ear from behind, "It wasn't you." I couldn't turn around, so I just stood there. When I came to my senses, I was so scared that I went home, half crying. Nothing strange ever happened after that. Sorry if my writing is a bit childish and difficult to understand. A long time ago, my family and I lived in a 5-story apartment complex. Our room was on the 3rd floor. Here's an incident that happened at that time. During the summer vacation of my 2nd year of junior high school, the apartment complex, an old public housing unit, had no air conditioning in the living room, so we always had the windows wide open during the summer. One night, just before 10 p.m., we heard what sounded like a child crying outside. When I went out onto the balcony, I could tell the sound was coming from upstairs, from the upper floors of the same building. At first I thought they must have locked their child out on the balcony after he had made a mess. That kind of thing happened sometimes. However, I did think that 10 p.m. was a little too late for that. The child's voice sounded like, "Mom, let me in." But it stopped soon after. I don't think it lasted more than 3 minutes. About 15 minutes later, a police car arrived at the bottom of our building. It was surprising for the residents to hear its siren at night. My mother went to look around, saying, "What if it's a crime?" I had a morning practice for my club the next day, so I went to bed without seeing what happened. From here on, I heard the details from my mother. A family living on the 5th floor had called 110, the emergency line for police in Japan. Apparently, the source of the voice was next door, in the corner room. The wife heard a child's voice next door, looked over the balcony, and saw a naked child crying on the balcony next door. So she called the police. The surprising part was, the room next door was vacant. The child was crying, saying "Mummy" to the empty, dark room. The police checked the vacant room, but the door and the balcony were locked, and there were no signs of anyone having broken in. Apparently, the child was not there when the wife looked next door again after calling the police, so he was never found. There were no families with young children on the floors above ours, and the family who called the police only had high school-aged siblings, so I don't think the missing toddler actually belonged to that family. At the time, it caused quite a stir in the whole apartment complex. Apparently, it was also brought up as a problem by the Housing Complex Residents Association, as heard from my mother. Some young people who heard about it came to the complex in the middle of the night to test their courage and ended up making a lot of noise. Of course, it caused a commotion. Many residents, including me, heard the sobbing sounds in real time. When I was still a kid, there was a park behind my elementary school where I used to play a lot. It had a big octopus playground equipment, so it was called Octopus Park, and it was really popular among elementary school students. During the day, it was crowded with old people and families playing gateball, but at night, the atmosphere changed completely. This is because the park was originally a cemetery, which was demolished to build the park. As proof of this, there is a huge memorial near the entrance to the park, and there are rows of graves near the park grounds. When I became a junior high school student, I came to this park with a friend one day during summer vacation to test my courage. There is a walking course that goes around the park, and it was a typical test of courage to walk along the course alone. It took about 10 minutes to go around the park. Even though it was a walking course, there were no streetlights, so we had to rely on the light of our cell phones. The first person came out and returned in about 5 minutes. He said he was scared and ran. He was mocked for being frightened, but he insisted it was dangerous and said something was following him. At first, I thought everyone was exaggerating, just to scare me. Then the second person came back in about 5 minutes, but something was obviously wrong. As soon as he returned, he said he wanted to stop. When I asked him, he said he felt like he was being followed by something and couldn't help but run. Then it was my turn. At first I walked, but gradually I started walking faster. There was definitely someone behind me. Not too close, not too far, but in an unpleasant position. I felt strangely calm and thought I could pull away if I ran, so I walked faster. I stopped walking about halfway through the course. It was dark and I couldn't see clearly, but I could make out a silhouette that looked like a person coming towards me. I could also see the light of my cell phone. I thought my friend had come because he was worried about me, so I ran as fast as I could. But it was my dad who was there, and he took me back home as soon as he saw me. On the way back, my dad said to me in the car that he had sent my friends home. He told me not to worry and added, "But you wouldn't have come back if I hadn't come to meet you." I didn't understand what was going on, but I got scolded so much that day that I went to bed in a sulk. The next day, my friend came to my house, and when I listened to him, I realized how dangerous the situation had been. Apparently, I was missing in the park that night. My friend had been searching for me for an hour since I left, waiting for more than 10 minutes and not coming back. He still couldn't find me, and finally decided to go call my dad. Then I realized something was strange. My friend searched for me in the opposite direction of the route I had taken because it was closer than chasing after me, and yet my friend and I didn't even see each other, let alone pass each other. It was like we were in different spaces, even though we were in the same park. There were two things I thought were strange experiences, but couldn't tell my friend. The first is how my dad found me. It was probably just a coincidence. I think he was lucky to find me. That was all I could think of, so I didn't say it. And the second is that the day my friend came to my house, something from that night was following him. That's the end of the story. I'm not good at writing, so I'm sorry if it's been hard to read, but thank you. By the way, both of my friends are still doing well. I meet them occasionally, and they seem fine. So, I think they're okay. Bye. This is a story from my summer vacation when I was in the 3rd grade of elementary school. I live in the countryside, and there was a Tanabata party, an annual event for the local children's association. Though Tanabata had already passed, it was a fun party where everyone got together, put on a show like a quiz, and made curry. For those who don't know, Tanabata is the Star Festival in Japan. It is celebrated on July 7th, and many towns have a festival in the streets. The participants were children, and we were allowed to use the small shrine office, which is usually used as a local meeting place. Several parents on duty helped out and managed the fire. That year, my mother was on duty for the Children's Association, so she and Tanaka-san, the mother of a boy in my class and a boy 2 years younger than me, bought ingredients and prepared to clean the shrine office. I think the Tanabata party ended safely around 9 p.m. Our area is divided into the south and north sides of a small mountain. The shrine office and most of the children's houses are on the north side, while my house is on the south side. The children on the north side all came by bicycle, so they just went home, whereas the children on the south side were picked up by their parents in their cars. The only ones left were me, my mother, and Tanaka-san. Tanaka-san's 2 children went home first because their houses were on the north side and close by, but I couldn't go home by myself, so I waited for my mother. After we finished cleaning up, my mother, Tanaka-san, and I locked the doors of the shrine office and were about to go home when my mother said, "Oh, I think the lights in the bathroom might still be on." Tanaka-san offered to check, but my mother insisted, "No, I'll go check. Tanaka-san, you go home first." After a bit of back and forth, Tanaka-san went home on her bicycle. My mother unlocked the door, checked the bathroom lights, which were off, locked the door again, and we got into the car, determined to go home. I think it was around 10 p.m. by that time. However, the car engine wouldn't start, no matter how many times my mother turned the key. "Oh, maybe the battery is dead. The engine won't start. What should we do?" It would take 30 minutes to walk home from the shrine office, and I didn't want to walk on a dark road in the middle of nowhere at night. We decided to call home and ask my father to come pick us up, but we didn't have a cell phone at the time, and the shrine office, which is usually unmanned, doesn't have a phone. So we had to borrow a phone from a nearby house. My mother told me to get out of the car, and we each pulled on the door handles. I heard the door unlock, but it didn't open. I rattled the handle many times, but it wouldn't open. It felt strange, like I was pushing against someone on the other side. I was so nervous, I didn't even think of opening the window. It was pitch black outside, and there was no one there except for my mother and me. Despite being a child, my well-built mother pushed the door with all her might, but it wouldn't open. I was half crying in fear, yelling to my mother, "Why wouldn't it open? Let's go home quickly." My mother was also looking anxious and saying, "Wait a minute." Looking back, I wonder if the car was actually shaking so much because of our struggle with the door. Finally, after several attempts, the engine started. "Close the door properly," my mother said. But even then, the door still wouldn't open, so we had no choice but to go home. From the shrine office, there were 2 routes home, clockwise or counterclockwise. The counterclockwise route was a narrow road along the mountain, passing by a cemetery with no streetlights. The clockwise route was a bit of a detour, passing through many houses on the north side before reaching the prefectural road, but it had streetlights and fewer cars. My mother and I didn't feel like taking the counterclockwise route, so we went home by the clockwise route and stopped at a convenience store on the way home. It wasn't one of the major stores like Lawson's, but a local retail store that closed at midnight. I don't really know why we stopped at a convenience store. Maybe my mother wanted to take a break in a bright place with people around. When I asked her later, she didn't really know why either. We parked, and when my mother timidly pushed the door, it opened normally, and the door on my side also opened. I felt such a sense of relief at that moment. Both my mother and I were drenched in sweat, and our faces were red. We bought ice cream at the convenience store and finally went home. And that's the story of that day. But something has been bothering me ever since. There have been many accidents happening near the intersection where we stopped by the convenience store on our way home. This intersection is on the route I took to school during elementary and junior high school. There are traffic lights and sidewalks, so serious accidents were rare. However, I started seeing police vehicles at the intersection many times. We live in the middle of nowhere with good visibility and little traffic. There aren't many traffic accidents in my city, but there are frequent accidents at this intersection. The scale of the accidents varies from small property damage to serious personal injury, with fatal accidents occurring once every 2 to 3 years, which is unusual for a city of our size. When I was in high school, a male student 1 year younger than me died there. Incidentally, our car crashed into that convenience store as well, injuring several delinquents hanging out in front of the vending machine. It may be a coincidence, but there's something else that's been bothering me. Tanaka-san's child, my classmate's younger brother, died at the beginning of winter that year. He had been feeling unwell for a few days, but when Tanaka-san went to wake him up, he was already cold. The exact cause of death is unclear. I haven't heard anything about Tanaka-san since then. So I wonder, did Tanaka-san and my family take something home from the shrine office that day? Tanaka-san came by bicycle and lost a child. Nearly 10 people have died near the convenience store and surrounding area we stopped at on the way home. We were in a light truck. Was the engine stalling and the door refusing to open because they didn't want to leave until everyone was in the car? Was the car rocking because they were in the car? Maybe we left them at the convenience store. What if we had gone straight home? That's a scary thought. During the summer holidays in my 3rd year of junior high school, I decided to go to an old air raid shelter with some friends as a sort of test of courage, or rather, just for fun. So we went together as a group of more than 10 people. I'm not sure of the exact number of people or who was with us, but the main characters were Nagisa, Osuke, Shun, and Kaito, who was easily scared. That makes about 4 key people, so I'll write about those 4. When we actually went to the air raid shelter, it was dark inside and had a nice atmosphere. However, there was a lot of trash lying around and graffiti, so it didn't feel very scary. We were talking about what to do when someone said, "I know where the apartment where a family was brutally murdered is located." So we all headed towards that apartment. When we got close, it was on a fairly large street, and there was a convenience store and a dentist, so it didn't seem scary at all. We followed his directions and came across a narrow road between 2 buildings with lots of weeds growing everywhere, just wide enough for a car to pass through. We went through there and went further in, and suddenly it seemed to open up. On the right side, there was a block wall, a little taller than a person, and on the left, there was an old-looking apartment. It might have just been my imagination, but there was a chill that made me shiver. The apartment was 2 stories high and had an outside staircase, but the staircase seemed to have collapsed. as all that remained was the iron framework. The paint was peeling and covered in rust. What caught my eye the most was a banknote stuck to a large window in one of the rooms on the first floor. I didn't get that close to see for sure, but there seemed to be some writing on the banknote, and it looked like it was torn at the bottom. As we were saying, "Can someone go and take a look at the banknote?" Nagisa said she would go, and walked over without hesitating. She went right up to the window and started touching it and peering inside, when suddenly she screamed and came running towards us. Everyone was so surprised that they ran out of the narrow path they had been through and out to the main street. It was really scary, but when we got to the main street, we noticed that Kaito, who was very scared, had wet himself, and we all started laughing at him. I felt like I was trying to hide my fear. I think we all joined in making fun of him, but I think everyone was probably doing the same. Nothing happened after that. Summer vacation ended, and the new semester started. Then Shun fell from the second floor of his house and broke his leg. He wasn't hospitalized, and came to school on crutches, attracting everyone's attention. But just a few days later, Osuke bumped into someone during gym class and suffered a retinal detachment, which led to him being hospitalized. He didn't go blind. His eyesight deteriorated, but he was able to see properly again. I went to visit him on Sunday of that week, and Osuke jokingly said that he must have been cursed because 2 of the original members had been injured in succession. But then, Kaito's body was found in the sea. There was no suicide note, and security cameras near the sea had captured Kaito going to the sea alone. It was decided that there was no crime, and it was an accident. But between us, we wondered if he really was cursed. They also suggested that it might be a good idea to have an exorcism, to which Nagisa replied, "He's probably okay now." Nagisa's story can be summarized as follows. That apartment was where Nagisa used to live, and the story about the family massacre was a hoax. The talisman that looked torn was a sticker from a Jiangxi talisman that was popular when Nagisa was little, and it was meant to be a freebie with candy. Nagisa said that the screaming and running was all just a prank by her to scare everyone. After seeing the apartment, we dispersed on the spot, and Kaito, who was so scared he wet himself, said, "I'll curse you. I'll curse everyone who made fun of me." Nagisa said that Shun and Osuke's injuries were also curses, and that Kaito had probably died after trying to curse someone again and failing. Everyone was still scared, but I think they were trying to come to terms with it with that story. We went to the hospital with the idea of telling this story to Osuke, who was hospitalized during the next holiday. Osuke seemed strange after hearing this story. Nagisa had been in the same school as Osuke since elementary school, but apparently Nagisa transferred schools when she was in the 2nd grade. They moved because it was decided to demolish the dilapidated apartment building, and at that time, Nagisa said that she was the last family living in that apartment building. What Osuke found strange was that an apartment building that was scheduled to be demolished when he was in the 2nd grade of elementary school was still standing when he was in the 3rd grade of junior high school. In the end, the apartment building remained until I graduated from high school and left my hometown. After that, when I occasionally went back to my parents' house, I never went out of my way to see it, and my parents also moved elsewhere. So I don't know what is happening now, but I wonder if the injuries and Kaito's death were really a curse, or if there really was some kind of incident that Nagisa was not told the truth about because she was still young, and something happened to that apartment. This story has been gnawing away at me from the inside. So, I wanted to hear other people's opinions. By the way, after Kaito's death, nothing in particular happened to anyone. This happened last summer. We went camping with 50 children, ranging from 4th grade of elementary school to 3rd grade of junior high school, and 20 adults from high school age students and above. This group is similar to the Boy Scouts. On the first night of the camp, we decided to do a ghost hunt and divided the children into 5 groups. Each group of 10 children was supervised by 2 adults. The remaining adults took on the role of scaring the children by hiding in the forest or other places. However, when they say they will scare you, they don't mean by screaming "Wah!", but by rustling grass and trees, throwing stones nearby, giggling, and doing other things to make you feel scared when you notice something is wrong. Of course, if the children don't notice, the whole adventure won't be exciting. So, the adults supervising them act as decoys and end up being more surprised than necessary by the strange happenings. The course for this ghost hunt involved walking along a single path through the forest, turning left along the way, and emerging onto a national highway, which was the finish line. My role was to hide in the forest, and next to me was a woman who was helping me. The 2 of us finished surprising 5 groups of children as planned. After a while, the other adults who had been hiding nearby began to come out one by one, so we headed back to the meeting place at the end of the national highway, chatting away. Just then, the adults who had been hiding near the national highway were still hiding and whispered to us, "Not yet, not yet." However, since we were hiding in the forest and had definitely seen Group 5 pass by, we just thought, I wonder what they're talking about, and didn't pay any attention, just headed to the meeting place. But when we got there were only 4 groups at the meeting place, and as we were discussing with the adults who were leading them how strange it was, the 5th and final group returned from the back. Curious, we talked to some adults who had been hiding in different parts of the forest from us. They told us there was one group of children who didn't react at all, no matter how hard we tried to scare them, and they just walked around with their heads down. Indeed, both the woman and I noticed that group seemed that way, and I remember us saying things like, "They're not very fun." However, the adults hiding near the national highway all said, there was no group like that. If that's the case, the group might not have turned left toward the national highway, but continued walking along the single path through the forest. In other words, although there were supposed to be 5 groups in total, there were actually 6 groups in the forest. Due to these strange occurrences, the annual ghost hunt has been cancelled this year. Hello watchers and listeners, thank you so much for watching. If you have a story to share, please send it to my email in the description below. This channel is mostly made up of stories sent in by viewers or people they know. Another way to support the channel is to sign up for my Patreon, where you can watch my videos ad-free. More perks will be added in the new year. Also, I will be adding new designs to the merch store, so keep an eye out for that. Thank you all for your continuous support. And remember,
Papa loves you.